I say if you want to talk about Iman, let the book of Iman talk about Iman. What is that? Qur'an itself. It's got enough Iman for you. You don't need another book to give you the basis of Iman. Other theology books are important. If somebody's suffering from a particular philosophical problem and it needs to be addressed, then you go to a theology book. And you try to address that, they try to address that problem. You understand? It's different. Now, that's intellectual Iman. But what else is there? There was intellectual Iman inside of us, and what else is there? Okay, so the argument, this is the ideal situation. This is the ideal situation, Allahu A'lam, as I've come to understand it. The people that have the most mature faith, because people are going to be at different levels of faith. The people that have the most mature faith in the Qur'an are called ulul albab. They're called the people of the most refined minds, refined essence. Okay? And these people that Allah talks about in Ali Imran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. They have reached a level of maturity not only in their intellectual quest for Iman, but also in their spiritual quest for Iman, even before they were exposed to revelation. The people of real, like the most mature kind of Iman, have developed their Iman without even actually directly accessing the revelation. Let's explore how. Allah says, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. No doubt in the creation of what? Heavens and the earth. وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. What is he saying? And the conflict of night and day, the succession of night and day. لَآيَاتٍ. There truly are miraculous signs. Not one, many, many, many lessons in each of those things. Night has many lessons, day has many lessons, skies have many lessons, earth has many lessons. Each of them have many, many miraculous lessons. For who? For the people of the most refined minds, for the people of pure intellect. Now what is this pure intellect? How does Allah define it Himself? He says in the next ayah, defining ulul albab, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Those who remember Allah standing, sitting, and on their sides. That's definition of refined minds. A. Point A. Those who remember Allah all the time. Point B. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. They think deeply about the creation of the skies and the earth. Okay. The previous ayah said, where are the ayat? What are the source material that these people use to build their Iman? Heavens and the earth, night and day. That's the source material. That's what you're studying. That's what you're thinking about. That's what you're looking at. You're not looking at a book. You're not studying religion. You're looking at the world around you. Yes? Okay, especially the works of Allah, the work of nature. Okay, now, the next ayah says they do two things, these people of refined minds. How do you know they're people of refined minds? They do two things. What are those two things? They remember Allah and they ponder. Remembering Allah is a spiritual exercise. Remembering Allah is a spiritual exercise. Thinking, pondering is an intellectual exercise. What Allah is telling us here is that the skies and the earth and the night and day will give you spiritual food and will also give you intellectual food. Pondering about the night and day can move you to tears. Looking at a beautiful night sky, if you're really thinking about Allah, can move you. And thinking about it will also, it'll be profound. It'll change the way you see reality, Sometimes, I'm reminded one time of, I don't recommend this practice, but one of my mentors, one of the brothers that I used to study with and study from also, he lives in New Jersey, he shall not be named. We were on a flight one time, and he used to yell at me a lot. He still does. So he's like, Naman, like one time we were at an MSA conference, this is before I had a beard. We're at an MSA conference, he goes, Naman, hey, when are you going to stop? I was like, stop what? Stop kidding yourself. Grow a beard. Okay. I had a beard since. He just put the smack down on me one day and that was it. That was the end of it. So we're on a flight together, I'm really happy. He goes, I want the window seat. I was like, okay, take the window seat. God. He goes, Naman, shut up. I was like, what? I didn't say anything. He goes, you will. I don't want to talk to you. Just be quiet. I'm looking out the window. Night flight, cloudy day. He's just looking out the window. 2 hours. And he turns around to me and says, now you can talk to me. What was going on, bro? What was that about? He goes, because he was studying philosophy and faith, and we were kind of studying these similar concepts that I'm sharing with you now. He goes, I wanted to test them. So when we sat on this flight, I threw my faith out the window, and I just wanted to see if I could come to the same conclusion myself. I'm Muslim again. I mean, don't try this at home. But he just wanted to experience it. Just think, just ponder. Ponder the sky, ponder the lights of the city you can see underneath, ponder the ocean, just ponder the clouds that are passing by. Just think, that's all he wanted to do. And he wanted to rediscover, refresh his faith. The idea behind this then for us is taking time out to observe nature, taking time out to spend time with nature, looking at the night sky, looking at the morning, going out for a walk in the morning. How many people even do that anymore? Right? Just go for a walk in the morning, just enjoy the sky. Look at the birds, hear the birds. Sit in the shade of a tree. Let's just that. Right? And you don't have to go to an exotic location to do this. You don't. You just have to experience something of nature, and you will be able to, inshallah ta'ala, develop an exercise out of it that makes you think about Allah and remember Him through His creation. And when they ponder enough, they're pondering both intellectually and they're also remembering Allah what? Spiritually. They get to a point of restlessness and say, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batilan. Master, you didn't create this without purpose. There's no way. Subhanak, you are way above this. Faqina adhab an-nar, save us from fire. Oof. This is a person's conclusion after pondering. Meaning, it's as though Allah is saying, first of all, you didn't create any of this without purpose, which means I haven't been created without purpose. And if I have purpose, that means that I will be held to account for the things I do. I don't want to be put in flames. And now, how does he know about fire? He'll explain. I had some conclusion that there's going to be some punishment, but I didn't know. But your messenger came. رَبَّنَا إِنَّنَا سَمِعْنَا مُنَادِيًا يُنَادِي لِلْإِيمَانِ أَنْ آمِنُوا بِرَبِّكُمْ فَآمَنَّا. Master, we heard the call of a caller calling us to Iman. So we heard his call and we said, yes, we believe. In other words, now we have entered into the legal faith. That ayah is about them entering into the legal Iman. Everything before that ayah was what? That was real Iman. And real Iman even came before the legal Iman. That was already there. Then they said, Ya Allah, we fortified it because the messenger came and told us everything we already believed inside of us. It agreed with us, with our conscience, and we just came into this faith. We're in. So please, Master, forgive our sins. And then start making dua after that. I mentioned this passage because it has this beautiful correlation between the legal and the real. And within the legal, what did I say? How many dimensions are there? Within the real, what dimensions are there? Spiritual and intellectual. And they say, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ Allah. They remember Allah, which is what? Spiritual. And then they think deeply, which is what? Intellectual. What we're learning is that according to the Qur'an, if these two dimensions are not there, then you're not going to be able to reach refined thought. You need both of those things. You need both of those things. Just like there's a balance between the body and the soul, there's a balance between intellectual and spiritual faith. Now sometimes young people have a spiritual problem. And it's been lingering long enough, and what did I say? If a spiritual problem lingers long enough, what does it turn into? It starts turning into an intellectual problem. And sometimes the answer given to them is, you need to seek out a spiritual answer to your problem. And the problem with that is, they've already developed an intellectual problem. So you can't just address the spiritual problem. Now you have to address the spiritual problem along with the intellectual problem. And also some people try to address only the intellectual problem. What's the problem with that? If the spiritual need is there, it's not met, you're not going to get the desired result. It's going to go from one intellectual problem to another intellectual problem to another intellectual problem. You'll find people that have a spiritual problem, when you address their intellectual philosophical issues, they develop a new issue. Then they develop a new issue after that, and they develop a new issue after that. And all of it's coming from the fact that the spiritual void hasn't been filled. The spiritual matter hasn't been filled. I'll tell you a story Shaykh Abdul Nasir told me. There was a fellow that was really, really critical of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Like he said, I don't want to be Muslim anymore. What kind of man is this? This hadith says this, that practice says that. How could he do this? How could he do that? Like he had all these criticisms of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I just did something. Did I drop a Musaf? Yes, let me pick it up. So he had all these criticisms of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Muslim guy too, right? And he's always bringing up a hadith or a quote or a seerah incident, and Shafi'i just tells him, why don't you read this book? Finish it. He gave him a book of the seerah. The entire seerah. Just finish the entire seerah. Don't read a hadith or one quote here and there or one incident. Read the entire thing. And come back to me after you're done. Now when you read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ from beginning to end, you get to know who he was. You get a glimpse of who he was. Not just some stuff he said, but who he was. And you know what that did for this man? He just fell in love with Rasulullah. He said, do you have another seerah book? I'd like to read another seerah book. Then another. He went through 5 seerah books. Just like that. And then he forced Shaykh Abdul Nasir to start a hadith halaqah. Why? It seemed at the surface he had an intellectual problem. He can't rationalize this hadith or this text. What seemed to be the problem? It was spiritual. The more he read, the more he discovered this man, it softened his heart. These two things are intertwined. You can't separate them. And the miracle of the Qur'an, one of the great miracles of the Qur'an, is the only book of its kind that combines spiritual remedy and intellectual remedy at the same time. There's no other book that will ever do this. It'll be a spiritual remedy and intellectual remedy at the same time. But it can only be that for people who seek that. The Qur'an only gives you what you come to it with. If you come to it with a skeptical attitude, you will find plenty of things to be skeptical about. It's the power of this book. There are people who read this book and they get even more further from Islam because they read the book. يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Why? Why would he misguide somebody with this book? وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. It's none but the inherently corrupt, meaning something is corrupt in your intention. Something is corrupt in your attitude. When you come to this book, you'll find even more reasons to be just turned off. You'll get pushed further and further and further away. Now, one aspect of legal and real iman that I wanted to talk to you about was how we pass judgments on people. Non-Muslims are potential believers in a Shari'i sense. Right? And we know that we can't even pass judgment on the potential iman inside someone, even if they're Fir'aun. Even if they're Fir'aun, you can't say he has no ounce of iman left in him. No, there's maybe some spark there, maybe it's covered up, maybe it can be unearthed. هَلَّكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّى وَأَهْدِيَكَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَى. Maybe you can become a better person, that's possible. You know, that's for them. But for ourselves, how do we develop our iman? How do we become people of lub? How do we develop this quality? By the way, do you know the story about these ayat? When these ayat came down, the Prophet ﷺ was actually lying down. And he was lying down next to Aisha radiallahu anha. And he asked her permission, if you give me permission, I need to go speak with my Rabb. And she said, you can go. He asked her permission to go pray, to leave the bed. It's nuts. So he goes to pray. And he starts reciting. And then Allah reveals these ayat to him while he's in salat. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. And he reads these ayat and he starts crying. And Aisha narrates radiallahu anha, she's watching him crying from the bed. And he cried so much his whole beard got drenched. When he was done reciting, he went to sajda, he wouldn't get up. He stayed in sajda for so long, there was a puddle where he was making sajda. And then he stayed in qiyam for so long, Bilal had to come because he was getting worried because Fajr time had already come. So he had to break up the salat to get him to go to Fajr. That's how moved Rasulullah ﷺ was over these ayat, ayat 190 to 195 of Al-Imran. Why? Because these ayat have the journey of iman. Iman inside a person. When he reads the ayat, إِنَّنَا سَمِعْنَا مُنَادِيًا يُنَادِي لِلْإِيمَانِ. The Prophet is reciting, we heard the call of a caller, calling us to Iman. Who's the caller? He himself. And who's calling him to, who's saying that we heard the call? All of his Sahaba. Everybody heard, They heard that call. And he's just so moved that Allah captures that entire, that incredible journey in one place, Now, the potential iman that every human being has, you don't know if something intellectual will trigger it, and you don't know if something, what's the other one? Spiritual will trigger it. You don't know. The Qur'an, however, is really interesting in answering this question. My job as a Muslim is to remind. Have you heard this before? I'm constantly told to what? Remind. I'm not told to make someone think. I'm told to remind. And Allah criticizes people, why don't they think? The Qur'an has an answer for this question. We have to try to replenish the spiritual void of ourselves and others by constantly what? Reminding. And until people make the decision that they will become thinkers, we can't help that. We can't help that because thought doesn't happen in a split second. Thought requires time. Thought requires that you step away and you really reflect. And that you can't think for anybody else. They have to think for themselves. You can't. You can remind someone. Now, if your foundation, your intellectual foundation, inshallah ta'ala, in the ideal case, your pondering led you to these conclusions, that life has a purpose, there is a master, I will be answerable. It led you to these conclusions and they're settled inside of you. In your heart of hearts, you're okay with these conclusions. And I pray all of us are in that place, right? Intellectually, it's set. Even then, your iman, your real iman is not safe. Because real iman isn't just intellectual, it is also spiritual. So now in order to keep it strong, now that the intellectual foundation is there, what must you do? You have to surround yourself with reminder, and that is the spiritual reinforcement. You have to surround yourself with reminder. That's why the Qur'an turns everything into a reminder. That's what's supposed to be above and beyond the intellectual foundation. First of all, you got through it working both of those together. But once the intellectual foundation is built, you don't have to revisit that again, but you continuously have to build the dhikr, the spiritual. So here's what that means. It doesn't matter that I've studied this stuff. It doesn't matter that I've studied, more passages of Qur'an than maybe you have. Maybe. I also need a reminder. My iman also goes up and down. Maybe my intellectual iman is at a certain place, but my spiritual iman constantly needs also a boost. When I wake up for Fajr and I go to the masjid, my iman goes up. I'm talking about myself. When I go to Isha and I pray Isha at the masjid, my iman goes up. When I listen to a reminder from anybody, my iman goes up. When I see a teacher and they give me good advice, my iman goes up. When I listen to a lecture, a khutbah, a speech, something from a teacher, a scholar, my iman goes up. When I recite Qur'an, my iman goes up. But when I'm wasting my time, when I'm oversleeping, when I'm getting angry, when I'm getting cranky, what happens to iman? It goes down. That's true for me and that's true for you. That's true for me and you. Iman will go up and down. And somebody says, how do I keep it? Awesome. Sorry. We're human. Our days fluctuate. So iman will fluctuate. There's nothing you can do about that. What you can try to do is try to remind yourself and others as much as possible. Surround yourself in a company of reminder. Right? What are these du'as? Du'a to enter the house, leave the house, come to the masjid, leave the masjid, bathroom, come out of the bathroom, change your clothes, eat your food, drink your water. What is the point of all of it? Spiritual iman. So you stay conscious. You stay in touch with Allah. That's it. That's the point of it. That's the point of it. The problem today, unfortunately though, this is the last comment I'm making, inshallah. The problem today, unfortunately, is for a lot of people, the intellectual iman, the foundations for the intellectual iman, the thought process that should lead you to that conviction at least, was not encouraged. Islamic education became about memorizing du'as, learning how to make wudu, cleaning yourself when you go to the bathroom, learning to pray. learning some surahs, and that's Islamic education. Islamic education was not think about the sky. What do you think? What do you wonder when you think this? Even from childhood, from 9, 10-year-olds, when kids get a little bit curious. Just to develop a thought, just thinking about reality, thinking about life, thinking about the one who made you. We didn't encourage this. We assumed, oh well, they're in a Muslim environment, the adhan is going on, the khutbah is going to happen, they're going to listen to beautiful recitation of the Qur'an, I'm going to make my kid memorize the entire Qur'an, of course they'll have iman. Wait, you're thinking that through dhikr alone they will get iman. But ulul albab, their iman doesn't just come from dhikr, it comes from dhikr and what? Tafakkur, from thought. You never encouraged thought. And guess what happened? Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young people that even memorized the Qur'an no longer interested in Islam. I have serious doubts, I have issues. And you know on top of that why that happened? Because they assumed that putting you in an Islamic school or in a Muslim environment or whatever must be dhikr. But a lot of these places are void of dhikr. Just because you're memorizing the Qur'an doesn't mean you're in an environment of dhikr. It's not a heart softening place. Actually, sometimes a lot of these environments are really harsh. And they're really wretched, you know. So we ended up destroying our next generation because we didn't understand certain fundamentals of iman. But the damage isn't beyond repair. We can still undo the damage. We can still fix this. And it needs to be fixed. This is not just a problem for us. This is a problem all over the ummah. All over the ummah. The most important thing everybody will tell you is your iman. That's all we get to bring in front of Allah on Judgment Day. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. That's all we got in front of Allah. That's all we have. And the last thing that we've actually helped to build into our next generations is iman. Everything else is there. Everything else is emphasized. It's crazy. I think it's just crazy. You know? Well, you know, we have a lot of things in our curriculum, A, B, C, you know, thought itself. Just taking time out, reflect. Allah says night and, reflections on night. Okay, ask a teenage boy, what do you see? I don't know, stars? What about the stars? I don't know, they're really far. What else? Think. And you know what? For some people, it's hard to think. Literally, you have to kind of, it's like pulling teeth. You have to get people used to thinking. They're not used to thinking. They're not used to actually just sitting there and pondering, reflecting, you know. And when you get it into your system though, oh, you become a different person. You become like my friend Mahan Bhai. He's weird cool. He's a thinker. We're just walking in the city, New York City one day, and he goes, Naman, and we stopped at a curb. I tell this story all the time because I'm so blown away by this story. He stopped at a curb and he looked at this little, you ever seen like concrete pavement and there's a little blade of grass coming out? He looked at it, he goes, Naman, hold on. I was like, what? He goes, look at that. I said, what? He goes, that's the only thing natural here. Everything else around us is artificial. Actually, everything else is out of place. This is the only thing that belongs here. And he goes, that's like Muslims, isn't it? We're the only ones that have faith and we feel out of place. And I'm like, deep. Why does he become like that? Because this man, if I tell you, the guy would never walk around without a mushaf in his hand. He would never have a conversation with me without an ayah coming out of his mouth first. Like, oh, that reminds me of an ayah. And he'd say the ayah and then he'd talk. He just thinks from the Qur'an. It just shapes the way he thinks. That's the gift of Qur'an. To shape the way we think. To make us ponder, you know. So the purpose of this discussion particularly was to highlight the distinction between real and fake. Not real and fake. Real and legal iman. Not real and fake feminine. I was switched gears to Arabic class. Sorry. Real and legal iman. Legal iman is for us. Real iman is for Allah. By the way, when it comes to real iman, you know what we're supposed to do? When it comes to real iman, what are we supposed to do for each other? Benefit of the doubt, absolutely. How do you know? What does the Qur'an say about how are you supposed to know if somebody has real iman? وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ أَلْقَى إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ لَسْتَ مُسْلِمًا؟ لا. مُؤْمِنًا. mu'minan. Don't you dare say about someone who as much as says salam to you that they're not a mu'min. Not even Muslim. They are a mu'min. So I am supposed to assume about you that you have the highest iman. You're supposed to assume about me that I have the highest iman on the what? Inside. On the inside. I cannot assume anything else. I'm not allowed to. And what makes me think that you have the highest level of iman? What one thing? The salam. But, I'm sorry, you can have whatever counter arguments you want. The ayah just said this. That's what Allah said. That's enough for me. That's it. That's it. I can't add other clauses to it. Allah didn't. And He protected us by doing so. Because if we were to judge each other's iman, we'd all be kafir. I mean, seriously. One time I gave a khutbah on this topic and somebody interrupted my khutbah in the middle. But what if someone is clearly munafiq? Like, and he was pointing at a board member at the masjid. You know, like, come on, dude. Come on. You can't be doing that stuff. You can't. Do it. Why? Because nifaq is on the inside, and that's only for Allah to judge. That is only for Allah to judge. If we internalize this, then inshallah ta'ala, our concern becomes our own iman. We're not worried about the iman of others. We're worried about our own iman. If somebody comes to us and says, I have a problem with iman, I'm feeling low in my iman, then you try to first thing, give them a reminder. First thing. If they have an intellectual problem, then it's not a one-time thing. You have to sit and talk it out. You have to sit and discuss, you know. And that's how you resolve that second matter. Bidnillah ta'ala.